What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Lockdown Defense Sports Network. I'm your host for today's episode, Robert Garcia, Young RG, as Coach likes to call me. And on today's episode, we are continuing once again with our off-season predictions, grades, reactions to each NFL team. We're going division by division each week. And of course, this week we are on the AFC North. If you haven't checked out yesterday's video, which Coach Mike Dubb released, it is the Ravens, last year's AFC North champs. So definitely go check that out if you haven't already. But for today's episode, I will be going over the Pittsburgh Steelers and what's next for them in 2025. Now, fair warning, Steelers fans, this is not going to be kind. I should just say that right off the bat. Not that maybe you were expecting it, but maybe if you weren't a little delusional. But I digress. On to the next slide here. We're going to be talking about, first things first, their offseason notable free agent signings. First one right off the bat is, of course, Darius Slay, the cornerback from Philadelphia, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Signed him to a simple 1-year, $10 million deal. Slay, very, very back end of his career. A lot of people are going to argue that that last year in Philly was his last year in his prime, and now it's just going to be kind of all downhill from there. Say what you will, but for the Steelers, who obviously lost Dante Jackson in free agency, they definitely needed to address the cornerback situation, and they did so with Darius Slay. And they also did so with another position, which we'll get to at the bottom here when we talk about, or another position with another player at the same position when we get to the trades down here at the bottom. But continuing on with the signings, they also signed linebacker Malik Harrison to a 2 years, $10 million deal. Backup QB, well, their QB last year, but backup QB Mason Rudolph to a 2-year, $8 million deal. Kenneth Gainwell, the running back, also former Philadelphia Eagle, 1 year, $1.79 million. Former Chief safety Juan Thornhill signed him to a year. Former Charger tight end Donald Parham signed him as well. He unfortunately, I think he tore his Achilles, was it? Or he had some kind of season-ending injury already in training camp. So hate to see that. I mean, guy just had so much potential. Came over from, I think it was the XFL or the UFL, something like that. And he was, highly regarded, just could not stay healthy for the life of him, and it's a shame to say. Also re-signed, a couple of re-signings, wide receiver Scotty Miller to a 1-year deal, Isaiah Loudermilk, the defensive interior lineman, 1-year deal, and they also re-signed the former Ram, but was with them last year, special teams ace, wide receiver Ben Skronik. Getting to that big trade now, they traded for, two of the bigger trades. They made this offseason, the latest one for cornerback Jalen Ramsey from the Dolphins this past season. We talked about this on the live show we did 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Yeah. And basically, yeah, we all kind of knew that it was just a matter of time before he was going to get traded. I think we're all pretty shocked that he went here. Considering also what the Steelers gave up for him. I mean, you really have to think about that. They gave back, I should say, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and a late round pick as well. And then they do get Jonnu Smith back in that deal as well. So that definitely helps them out a lot. Obviously, with that, I think a lot of people kind of were like, oh my God, is Aaron Rodgers already, pulling the puppet strings here in Pittsburgh? But I mean, I think that Mike Tomlin would have made this deal regardless whether Rodgers was here or not. But I just personally don't think it's a great deal at all. You're trading for an aging cornerback who you're probably expecting to play safety, right? I mean, you would think, because you already have, I think it's Joey Porter Jr., if I recall correctly. Yeah, so you have Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey, and oh my God, Darius Slay. Jesus Christ, losing my mind here. So that's your cornerback room at the moment. Obviously, you lose out on Minkah, so a lot of people are thinking maybe Jalen's going to come over and play safety because you already have Porter Jr. and obviously Darius Slay. So I'm just all around shocked in every regard and in every which way possible, because the Steelers and Steelers fans certainly have been, I feel like I've been calling for a reset of this team, for this franchise, for like the last 5 years, maybe. A lot of people wanted Tomlin gone this season, but Pittsburgh, for better or for worse, they do not fire head coaches. And I think just right now we're kind of in that for worse part of it, as sad as it seems, in wanting to continuously stay relevant and stay talked about as in terms of being a playoff team, being here in January come into the season. Um, I think obviously they've done a great job of that. There's no denying that. I mean, how many years is it we're on now where Mike Tomlin has had non-losing seasons, or has winning seasons now? So, I mean, it's great, and it should obviously be talked about. And I'm no way saying that Mike Tomlin is a bad head coach by any means necessary. But I just think when you look at it, I mean, Andy Reid got fired, right? And I mean, we look at Andy Reid now and we're like, oh my God, you'd be stupid to fire Andy Reid. But Andy Reid got fired after going to 4 straight NFC Championship games with the Eagles and not getting a Super Bowl win. They got to a Super Bowl one of those years, but obviously that was the year T.O. broke his leg against the Patriots, yada yada. But point is, Andy Reid, great coaches can get fired. And I do think Mike Tomlin is a great coach. I just think that they have run their course here in Pittsburgh. There's obviously going to be the people that hate on Tomlin saying that, oh, he wouldn't have won a Super Bowl. And it was, oh my God, the coach's name is, oh my God, not Bill Cowher. Oh my God, that's his name. Jesus. Bill Cowher, when obviously, people will say that Tomlin took Cowher's team to the Super Bowl and won it, and that, he didn't really do anything. He shouldn't really get credit for that. But obviously, I think you have to give credit for that, credit where credit is due. And I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think Tomlin would definitely succeed somewhere else. I think that the Steelers would benefit from a hard reset. And I think a season, going 3-14, something dastardly like that would truly help this franchise, because they need to reset at quarterback. Their last couple of first round quarterbacks, picking in the back half of the first round, have obviously not really worked out too well. A couple of the second round quarterbacks haven't worked out too well as well. So I just think it's time to tear it all down. Unfortunately, I don't think they will. And clearly this year they're not, given the signings that they have here. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers isn't really on this list here. We did not add him onto this list here just because I feel like, shocker, everybody knew that Aaron Rodgers was going here. There was quite literally nowhere else that he was going to go. He has theoretically been on this team for about 3 months, and it was only just made official this past week, 2 weeks or so. So with that all being said, moving on to of course, talking about, yes, this big trade and coaching changes. Obviously, talking about coaching changes just now, there is none. We knew that going into this. They're just kind of trying to run it back this year. Again, this is all playing into what this offseason grade I'm going to give them is. But this trade here, I wanted to highlight this trade in particular, the DK for George Pickens, George Pickens for DK Metcalf trade. I think now obviously, when you brought him in, I don't know why I'm saying that. I'm saying this trade like they traded DK for Pickens. That was terrible. They traded out George Pickens, brought in DK Metcalf, and at the time when they were both in the same receiver room, a lot of people were questioning the locker room and how well it was going to be maintained. Obviously, those questions quickly got answered once they traded away George Pickens to the Cowboys. But I think all those questions have definitely resurfaced now that they have added Jalen Ramsey into the fold. There is a lot of personality in that locker room. So I'm really not sure how it's going to go, how Tomlin's going to be able to handle this. Now, you could argue that their division's tough and easy. It goes both ways, right? It's tough because all division games are tough, first and foremost. And this division in general has always been just relatively one of the tougher divisions. The games are a lot more defensive oriented. And they are, a lot more slower pace, a lot more running the ball. You don't really see too many points. We obviously we've seen a couple of shootouts, and that's because really the Bengals defense is really poor, but we have seen those shootouts here and there. So, very exciting games between these division rivals all the time. But besides that point, or besides that fact, it's the Browns obviously are the Browns. The Bengals are, it depends on who you ask. Some people think they're top 10. Some people think that they're not even going to be, they're going to be picking top 5 this year. Like there's a lot of, and obviously, I think the Ravens are the only team that in the division is pretty much universally regarded as, the best team in the division and a contender at the very least. So with all that being said, Steelers are going to have a second place schedule this year because they did make a wild card spot last year. They were second in the division. So tough as a schedule as last season when you barely snuck into the playoffs, but this is what their specialty is barely finishing above 500, just being good enough to make a playoff spot, but never to win a playoff game, never to have a home playoff game, especially in this division. So I just think with this trade in particular, and given the nature of their division, I don't think they got better. I love DK. I just don't like DK on the Steelers. I think this team in general is just a bunch of forced puzzle pieces that don't work, and it kind of makes a picture the way you've set it up, but it's definitely not what it's supposed to be. And I just think that the Steelers fans, maybe they're not getting, we've seen a couple of, online personalities, I'm not going to get specific, but share their views for this team and the direction that it's headed. With that all being said, let's get into their draft class to not try to be too negative. Getting into the 2025 draft class for them, their first round pick was, of course, Derek Harmon, the defensive lineman out of Oregon. A lot of people thought Shador was going to go here on draft night. I remember that whole shabacle there. So, that's how that went. And he ended up going to the division rival Browns in the 5th round. But great pick here in Derek Harmon. They are obviously addressing the D-line, and then they are addressing the running back room with the departure of Najee Harrison this year. Najee Harrison, geez, man, I'm losing my mind. Najee Harris this offseason. So, of course, Caleb Johnson gets taken there in the 3rd round, the running back out of Iowa. 4th round pick here in Jack Sawyer, the once highly touted prospect, kind of slid down draft boards this past season, a bit of an injury history out of Ohio State. He could be a really, that X factor piece that we look back on like, oh my God, how did he fall that far? Pairing him opposite of TJ Watt, putting a little asterisk on that because TJ Watt still hasn't been signed yet. That's a whole other, I didn't really want to get into that in this video because we are, again, talked about that in the live show that we did. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely check that out. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty certain what's going to happen, what needs to happen with TJ Watt. You need to re-sign him, and you have potentially somebody that can be his running mate on at least 3rd downs for this upcoming season. Addressing the defense even harder with another defensive lineman, Yaha Black out of Iowa, and then their only other offensive drafted piece, the quarterback Will Howard out of Ohio State, their 2nd Ohio State pick as well, and rounding out the draft with their 2 7th-round picks, a couple of defensive pieces, a linebacker, Carson Bruner out of Washington, and another cornerback, Dante Kent out of Central Michigan. Getting into the schedule now, this is where, Steelers fans maybe look away or don't, depending on what you're rooting for this year. I know all too well what it's like to root for losses, so believe me, I understand. So looking at it, the first 3 weeks of the season maybe you could argue the first 4 weeks of the season look very winnable. You have Jets, Seahawks, Patriots, Vikings. Jets week 1, I mean, it's just cinema at this point. Rodgers, former team from last year. Seahawks, Patriots, Vikings are all teams that you could argue took massive steps. Well, Patriots, besides that, they're just insanely young, but they were just awful last year. Seahawks, you could argue, took massive steps back. Vikings, you could argue, took a massive step back at quarterback because they just have a rookie who's never played. So you could easily come away from these first 4 weeks 3-1, and I think that's where fans are going to have false hope going into the early bye in week 5 because you come out against the Browns, could easily be 4-1, but then you have Bengals, Packers, Colts, and Chargers. Could definitely go 1-3 in that situation. And 3 of those games are primetime games, including the back-to-back Thursday night and Sunday night games against against the Bengals and the Packers. And then you finish off that stand with a road Sunday night game at the Chargers. Going into the next 4 weeks of the season, you got Bengals, Bears, Bills, Ravens, obviously two division rivalry teams. Another team that was one of the top teams of the conference last year in the Bills, and of course the Bears, where everybody's just, projecting them to take an insanely big leap forward this year. Rounding out here in the last 5 games of the season, you got the Ravens again. I don't know why I'm saying again. It's the first time. Ravens for the first time in the season. Dolphins, Lions, Browns. So, Dolphins, Browns, you kind of have like a one and the other with the Ravens. Easy game Dolphins, Lions, easier game Browns. Finishing it off with the Ravens. So a little bit rough there that both of your Ravens games are in the back half of the year. Your only hope potentially is that the Ravens do so well that week 18, they don't even need to play anyone, and you can maybe sneak out a win there. But you could just see that even with this schedule, like, it's just the right mix of bad teams and good teams that, for some of these weeks, the Steelers are by far, and they should be by far, the favorites. But then you look at some of these other weeks and it's just like, you just don't know what you're going to get. I'd argue, I'm sorry for everybody that is still an Aaron Rodgers believer. He's not the same guy. He's older now. Not everybody's going to be Tom Brady playing well into their 40s. And Brady did so many other things, didn't take as many hits, was able to get able to get the ball out quicker, was an all-around team player, wasn't for himself. Like, there's just so many things that Aaron Rodgers doesn't bring to the table. And I just don't think he's going to be able to bring a winning, I don't want to say a winning season, because I do think they are going to have a somewhat winning season. I just don't think he's going to bring winning ways to the Steelers like they so desperately need. So with all that being said, giving my final offseason grade and my prediction for their record, I have their record going 8-9, 9-8. Like, that is truly the basement ceiling for this team. Like, I just think they're going to be just good enough to not make the playoffs, or just good enough to barely squeak in. I truly do think this year they're not, though, because the AFC is just so loaded, and barring, some insane injuries to some teams, I don't think so. They would also need to stay relatively healthy during that as well, because they're about an injury or two away from just completely getting their season derailed. But I just don't think that, it would honestly, this would be so much better for them this year if they were to just go like 0-17, like, just completely tank it, hit the I can't stress this enough about how bad it is for the Steelers this offseason, just given the nature of the division and the nature of this team. It's truly bizarre. Obviously, you see there the offseason grade is a D-. I just didn't like anything they did this offseason. I like their draft a little bit, but all in all, I just have no idea what the vision is. I have no idea what their plan is. I mean, if their goal is to break that record of consistently not having losing seasons, cool. But I think if they truly want to compete, I just think their only shot to compete in the near future is to reset now, because you're gonna have Lamar, you're gonna have Joe Burrow, and if Shador is what everybody expected him to be coming into the draft, where he was a top first round pick graded talent, dude, y'all are in trouble. It's going to be a very, very, because we're saying the same thing about Bo Nix potentially in the AFC West. It could be a very, similar case where you're the only team in your division without a quarterback, a viable quarterback, and you're just going to be miserable for these division games. So with that all being said, guys, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. Please be sure to check out all of our social medias here. Be sure to follow the gang on all the socials. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it here at Lockdown Defense Sports Network. Speaking of that, please check us out on social medias. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube, and of course the Gmail. Unfortunately, like I mentioned last week, no carrier pigeon yet, but we are hard at work. We will let you know when it is there. With that all being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.